Good day, my dear students. How are you? I am so grateful that you're here with me today. May I know who's absent for today? Kindly check who's not around. Okay, thank you. So later we will have an activity which will serve also as your attendance for today. So before we proceed for today's discussion, we will have a short activity. Class, are you familiar with anagram? It is a word game wherein you will arrange letters into their correct positions to unscramble the word or phrase. So I will flash one by one the words that you will arrange. Then you will write your answers on a piece of paper and you will have 15 seconds each. Are you ready? Okay, so let's get started.
15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How many words you arranged correctly? So now let's talk about literary movements. The word meta means after. Thus, the metaphysics deals with the questions that can be explained by science. It questions the nature of reality in a philosophical way. Metaphysics can cover a broad range of topics from religious to consciousness. It is about exploration and philosophy, not about science and mathematics. So let's discover the different characteristics of metaphysics. The themes of metaphysical poetry is spiritual and has often religious themes. Moreover, it focuses on love as the union of soul. In metaphysical poetry, it uses literary devices such as metaphors, puns, paradoxes, and meter to create drama and tension. So in addition, metaphysical poetry uses scientific, medical, and legal words and phrases to create arguments about the philosophical aspect of life. The poets in metaphysical poems were men of high intellect. They were all graduated from Oxford University, Cambridge University, or they studied at one of the Inns of Court in the city of London. With the help of their vast knowledge, they presented new ideas and stories to their readers. However, in metaphysical poetry is known for its unclarity because it is considered highly ambiguous and obscure due to high intellect and knowledge of metaphysical poets. The poetry is greatly challenging to understand at the first reading. It needs full concentration and full attention to getting to the roots of the matter. But metaphysical poetry is considered to be brief and concise. Every line conveys a lot of meanings in a few words. Every word is adjusted in every line like a brick in a wall and conveys the message of the author. Hence, there is no wastage of words. There are sayings in the poetry. Metaphysical poetry is a vast collection of maxims and sayings. Thus, epigrammatic quality is part and parcel of the metaphysical poetry. John Donne is a pioneer in this regard. A significant feature of metaphysical poetry is the use of metaphysical conceits. It is the unique quality of metaphysical poetry. A conceit is a comparison of two ulit. A conceit is a conceit is a conceit is a comparison of two dissimilar things, which may have very little in common. Example, Abraham Coley in his poem The Mistress compares his love for ladies to his habit of traveling in various countries of the world. Originality is the hallmark of metaphysical poets. All the metaphysical poets were unique and original in their ideas and thoughts. They didn't follow the path of their contemporary poets. They stood against their contemporaries and followed their own way of writing poetry. Metaphysical wit is also a noteworthy feature of metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical wit is the expression of one's idea and thoughts, using aptly and technically the words and various of figures of speech in such a manner and as to provide pleasure to the readers. John Donne is called the monarch of wit in the history of metaphysical poetry. Platonic love is another feature of metaphysical poetry. Platonic love means spiritual love, which is free from elements of physical love. So always remember, class, metaphysical poetry is not intended to be read in a passive way. Its use of paradox, imagery, conceit, and wit is meant to awaken the reader. Metaphysical poetry asks the philosophical questions about religion, faith, spirituality, and being.
Hello, good morning students. How are you today? Okay, that's good. So in today's topic, we will discuss the three literary movements. What are these? Okay, the Symbolist, Harlem Renaissance, and the Beat or the Beat generations. So let's start with the Symbolist. What is Symbolist? A term specifically applied to the work of late 19th century French writers who reacted against the descriptive precision and objectivity of realism and scientific determination of the naturalism. Meaning, this movement is originated with a group of French poets in the late 19th century who reacted against realism with the poetry of suggestion based on private symbols and experimented with new poetic forms such as free verse and prose poem. They also spread painting and the theater and influenced Russia, European, and American arts of the 20th century. During the Symbolism movement, we have here the writers of this movement. First, Arthur Symons. Arthur Symons is the Symbolist movement in literature in the year 1899. Next, Stephen Mallarmé, major influence on 19th and 20th century poetry. Charles Baudelaire, the most influential of the Symbolists. Arthur Rimbaud, major influence on the modern poetry. And last one, Paul Verlaine was the one of the principal founders of the Symbolist movement. There's a lot of writers in the Symbolism movement, but I just pick 5. These are the most known writers in this movement. So let's go now to the importance of symbolism. Symbolism is very important as it offers freedom to writers to give different interpretation of one thing in their work. Moreover, symbolism has given universality to the characters as well as the themes in the world of literature. Symbolism is to convey the hidden meaning to the reader or listener. to convey his mood and emotion. The writers uses symbolism. Most of the writers, painters, uses this movement to express their emotions, feelings. For example, if you are heartbroken, okay, heartbroken, you are going to use this to express what you are feeling, what you feel. Next one, a writer can use a person, place, word, action, and object as a symbol. Okay, in this sentence or definition, we are actually using it. For example, if we do a heart, okay, heart, it means what? It means love, okay? It symbolizes love. Do you understand? Okay, next one. It can be in a visual image or gesture. For example, I will use this gesture, this one. It symbolizes what? Okay, it symbolizes peace. It symbolizes peace. In our church, we use this sign as a peace. Okay. Next, it gives depth to writing that cannot be expressed straightforwardly. As I said a while back, writers are using this movement to express their feelings through poem, painting, and etc. If a person is shy to share what she feels, she can use this movement. Okay? Do you understand? She can use this movement to express what she feels through a poem, through a painting, like that. So let's go now to another one. It influences as an artistic movement. Symbolism is an extension of the aesthetic of art for art's sake. In today's modern world, most of us is just looking for the creativity, the color itself. We are just looking for the brightness of the painting, the colorfulness which attract us the most. But we are not looking for the meaning of the painting. We're not looking for the behind the painting there's a message, and we are not looking for it. Okay. Before I will go to the next movement, do you understand what is symbolism or symbolist movement? Do you understand? Okay, I like it. So let's go to the another movement, which is Harlem Renaissance. Harlem Renaissance was an African American cultural movement that flourished in the 1920s and had Harlem in New York City as its symbolic capital. It is considered the most influential period in African American in the literary history. And Harlem Renaissance was a golden age for African American artists, writers, and musicians. It was a memorable movement to the writers, artists, and the musicians. Harlem Renaissance created a wide range of literary works from poetry to plays, plays to prose, and prose to novels. The main theme for the writing were about racial identity, equality, black life in the South and North, and the other racial issues. In this movement, discrimination is very popular, So let's go now to characteristic of Harlem Renaissance poetry. The first one is intent. Intent was to improve and uplift American through historical awareness and a popular culture that reflect self-awareness and self-worth in Black Americans. Next, focus and theme. the examination of the historical place of the contemporary African American with regards to history and the future. Next one is music theme. The interplay between jazz musician and the call and response structure of slave song are impact the structure of Renaissance poetry. Last one, the poetic influence. This style saw the ironic interpolation of element of Negro spirituals into contemporary poetry. Let's go to the writers of Harlem Renaissance. First one, Langston Hughes, in the year 1901 to 1967. Zora Neale Hurston, in the year 1891 to 1960. Countee Cullen, 1903 to 1946. Claude McKay, 1889 to 1948. Jesse Redmond Fawcett, 1882 to 1961. Jean Toomer, 1894 to 1967. And Nella Larson, in the year 1891 to 1964. Harlem Renaissance poetry. Example. Here's an example of Harlem Renaissance poetry. From the Dark Tower by Countee Cullen. From the Dark Tower was published in 1927 in Cullen's second poetry collection titled Copper Sun. From the Dark Tower explores the subject of racism, specifically how black people are deprived of what's rightful leaders. It addresses the future of black men, women, and the children. The poet's speaker begins by saying that we, black men and women, aren't always going to be the ones doing all the hard work that others profit from. We, he adds, okay, aren't always going to be the ones submitting to mistreatment. The second half of the poem contains the image that this piece is famous for. Okay, this this one. The night whose sable breast relieves the stark. White star is no less lovely being dark. And there are buds that cannot bloom at all in light but crumple, peaches and fall. So in dark we hide the heart that bleeds, and wait and tend our agonizing seat. Okay, class. In the Harlem Renaissance, do you understand it? I need to clarify, or I need to question you if you do understand. Do you understand it? Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next, the last one, the beat. Okay, the beat is a literary movement began after the Second World War and known for its liberal attitude towards life. In the year 1940s and 50s, a new generation of poets rebelled against the convention of mainstream American life and writing. They became known as the beat poets, a name that evokes weariness, down and outness. The beat under a piece of mass and beatic spirituality. Jack Kerouac, he coined the term beat generation, means to describe how they felt down, defeated and out of place among the returning of soldiers and businessmen. The beats were as much about an attitude and culture as they were about a literary style. Many of the beats came from upper or middle class backgrounds and went to prestigious university. For example, Ginsberg and Kerouac met at Columbia University in New York, but they chose to rebel against societal norms. These two writers turned up being a rebel against the societal norms. These are the beat writers. First one is Allen Ginsberg, one of the 20th century's most influential poets, regarded as a founding father of the beat movement and known for its work like whole. Okay, the father of the beat movement is Allen Ginsberg. Next, Jack Kerouac was an American writer best known for the novel On the Road, which became an American classical pioneering the beats generation in the year 1950s. Next, Ken Kesey, novelist, wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and is credited with helping to usher in the era of psychedelic drug and in the 1960s. Amira Baraka is an African-American poet, activist, and scholar. He was an influential black nationalist and later became a Marxist. William Burroughs was a Beat Generation writer known for his startling non-tradition account of drug culture, most famously in the book of Naked Lunch. Okay. Why did the Beat writers propose this movement? Why? The Beat Generation was a group of American writers, producers, artists who experimented with drugs, alternative forms of sexuality, interest with the Eastern religious culture, rejection of materialism, and the idealizing of means of expression. The characteristic of beat poetry is rebellion against the traditional values, American and Eastern mythology, spontaneous writing, just rhythms, and generalized rejection of academic formalism. Here's an example of Gary Snyder's poem, at the Tower Peak. It's just one word. This spine of the rock and stream and snow and the wash of gravels, silt, sand, bunch grasses, salt bush, beef fields, 20 million human people downstream here below. At the Tower Peak is a poem by Gary Snyder, a writer, lecturer, and environmental activist born and raised in San Francisco. Snyder is known for the best for having a wide range of style in his poem, rarely adopting conventional meters or rhymes, and his works is frequently filled with references to nature and Buddhist spirituality. So that's it for the beat and the tree literary movement, which is the symbol is Harlem Renaissance and the beat. Okay, do you understand it? Any question, clarification with regards to our topic? It's your time to ask question. You are free to ask question. Okay, class, please. Please, Erickson, do you want to recite or do you want to ask me a question? Ira, Angel, none. Okay.
Confessional poetry. The movement emerged during the late 1950s and early 1960s and was known for the first person and its strong emotion expressive poems. Confessional poetry is marked by its intimate, autobiographical subject matter that is sometimes referred as grotesque. Depression, suicidal tendencies, alcoholism, drug abuse are all openly discussed. A confessional poet's emotional authenticity draws on personal experience and real situations, giving negative emotion, fear, anger, sadness, impotence, the attention and artistic relevance traditionally reserved for the positive emotions. Confessional poetry helped inaugurate a range of social and artistic practices aimed at uncovering, exposing, confessing, and sharing new and more intimate versions of desperate selves. The characteristics of a confessional poems are first-person narration, a personal poetry which often uses the pronouns I, me, and myself. Intimate and personal subject, a poetry full of open, hidden personal feelings, things that are considered embarrassing and shameful, were discussed frankly in this kind of poetry. Lyrical workmanship, they paid attention to rhythm and prosody in their poems. Use of allusion, metaphor, can be seen in such kind of poetry. Confessional poems usually uses these following devices: diction, imagery, rhyme, simile and metaphor, symbolism, repetition and alliteration, and lastly, irony. Here are some of the remarkable literature and their authors. First is Study by Sylvia Plath, which mirrors the poet's life. Through the poem, Plath seeks revenge and makes peace with herself, declaring that no matter how evil her father was, she is through with him. The possible hate, rage, and even love that Plath felt for her father was imprinted in the poem, with the help of these following devices: imagery, metaphor, and rhyming words. Another literature by the same author is the poem Lady Lazarus. Lady Lazarus talks about her third suicide attempt and her rebirth. A lot of similarities is visible with the writer and Lady Lazarus. Like Plath, the one who wrote this poem is a patient of depression and had attempted suicide many times. Lastly, another remarkable writer with his literature is Robert Lowell. With the confessional poem, Skunk R, the author dedicates this poem to his friend and poet Elizabeth Bishop. The speaker mirrors Lowell because he as well had suffered from a mental illness and needed hospitalization. New York School. New York School was an artistic movement headed by poets and painters living in New York City from 1950s to 1960s, and is unique in the sense that many works focus on intense pop mainstream culture references. This movement was heavily influenced by Surrealism and Modernism. Their poetry was experimental, philosophical, and staunch, anti-establishment, and anti-academic. The poets really focused on being avant-garde and expressing themselves. The school played a key role in the gay rights, expressionist movements of the 60s because all of the headlining poets were gay. Their works gave insight and inspiration to the idea that being gay was a social identity and a form of expression for the emerging LGBTQ community. Their poetry is steeped in the facts, events, and objects of everyday life. Like the abstract expressionists, the poets become increasingly interested in the surface and medium of the work of art. In other words, they began to think that the language of the poem, its sound, structure, forms, interactions of words and textures should be just as important as any attempt to create meaning. The poets in the school didn't name themselves as a school rather than a movement, and held much distaste with the classification. The artistic branch of the movement modernized abstract painting called action painting, in which they sometimes used the New York poets' works to help them form their emotions. Auber's poetry is often characterized as oblique, indeterminate, and periphrastic. O'Hara's poetry can be an intriguing mixture of surrealism and juxtapositions, but at other times it contains a very casual discourse with a conversational style that seems like a letter written to a friend. Schuyler is known for his conversational style and charm, and he is perhaps the most lyrical and musical of the group. Guest language is full of tonal complexity that is often rendered through shifts in sound and syntax rather than content. Koch poetry is replaced with wit and humor, and it tends to be more narrative and direct than that of the other writers of the group. New York poetry is characterized by an impulse to blur the boundary between art and life. In writing poetry, that includes the discourse and details of normal human interaction, the poets conflated the difference between what is normally considered material for art and what people experience in day-to-day existence. The most significant of the characteristic is the poetry's sense of process, in which a work tends to emphasize or give attention to its own methods, procedures and strategies rather than simply the result. It revealed its own process, not just simply focusing on the result or on the product. In their poetry, the influence of painting is very evident through a shift in attention from symbolism, metaphor, and the significance to the actual operation and materials required to write a poem. Writers of the New York School of Poetry generally is divided into the first and second generation of writers. The Black Art movement began in 1965 and ended in 1975 among Black Americans. It is a period of artistic and literary development. Politically motivated Black poets, artists, dramatists, musicians, and writers who emerged in this wake of the Black Power movement. The movement aimed to create a populist art form in order to promote the concept of Black separatism. Many followers saw the artist as an activist who was responsible for the establishment of racially segregated publishing house, theater troupes, and study groups. The movement's literature, primarily written in Black English vernacular and with a confrontational tone, addresses issues such as interracial tension, socio-political awareness, and the relevance of African history and culture to Blacks in the United States. The movement focused on music, literature, drama, and the visual arts made up of Black artists and intellectuals. Its participants shared many of the ideologies of Black self-determination, political beliefs, and African American culture. The movement was a lineal descendant of the Harlem Renaissance because the link of these two is so strong. That's why some scholars call this movement as the Second Renaissance. The Black Art movement overlapped with the articulation of the principle referred to as the Black aesthetic. It wasn't limited to poetry. Poetry was that saw the most expansion and growth at that time. Writers during this movement also formed a Black voice that drew on African American vernacular songs and sermon and experimental free verse, incorporating jazz, blues, and many linguistic and rhythmic techniques also associated with the beat movement. Mamu Amiri Baraka, father of the Black Art movement. The Black Art movement left behind many timeless and stirring pieces of literature, poetry, and theater. Ironically, despite the male-dominated nature of this movement, several Black female writers rose to lasting fame. Additionally, the Black Art movement helped lay the foundation of modern-day spoken word and hip-hop.
Okay, so since you don't have any clarifications, questions, I have an recitation activity for today and it is entitled Guessing the Pictures. So, tell me whether it is Symbolist movement, Harlem Renaissance movement, or the Beat movement. Okay, number one. Who like to answer number one, this one? What is your observation in this painting, in this art? Okay. Okay, Brazil. Please answer this one. Since you raised your hand, tell me whether it is the Beat, Renaissance, or the Symbolist. What art is this? Okay. What? Come again? Okay. Your answer is Symbolist. Actually, in this art, in this painting, it is a Renaissance painting. Okay? It is a Renaissance painting. This one is a Renaissance painting. Thank you, Brazil, for answering or reciting. Next one is this one. What painting is this? What movement or in what century or movement is this painting? Okay, sunod-sunod na. Okay? Come, please stand. Erin. What movement is this? This painting? What do you observe in here? Renaissance. Yes, it's correct. Renaissance. It is a Renaissance art. Last two. What movement is this? Wants to answer? Faster. Abby. Abby. What movement is this? What? Okay. The beat. Yes. Yeah, you're correct. The beat. This is beat generation picture. Last one, please. This one. Okay, Sival, please. Oh, yes, you're correct. It is a confessional movement. So that's it. You're intelligent, smart, class. The next will be a group activity. Okay, group activity. Since you said that you understand our topic today, what we will going to do is a group activity. Okay? I will group you into 5 groups. Okay, your groupings will be like this. This row 1 will be the group 1. Row 2 will be the group 2. Row 3 will be the group 3. And it follows to group 4 and group 5. So, what we will going to do is I will give a question and research it through your cell phones, books, and you can go to library, okay? I'm allowing you to use your phones. Class, are you listening? Okay. I'm allowing you to use your phones, but make sure you are just going to use it for your activity. Understood? Okay. Group 1, your question is search for 3 characteristics of a symbolist and give their meaning or definition. Got it? Okay. Group 2, what are the contributions of the Harlem Renaissance? What are the contributions of Harlem Renaissance? Group 3, what is the importance of beat generation? What is the importance of beat generation? Group 4, during the metaphysical, what were their movements? During the metaphysical, what were their movements? Group 5, in confessional poems, what are the usually devices that they were using and give the definitions? Group 5, in confessional poems, what are usually the devices that they were using and give the definition? Understood? Are there any clarification before you start your activity today? None? Okay, you may proceed now. Class, since we don't have enough time, please submit me your draft for today and pass your final group activity later, okay? Someone is raising her hand. What's that, Natalie? Okay, thank you for asking. Due of your activity will be on 4:30 p.m. today. 4:30 p.m. today. If you will not submit it at the given time, I will give you a deduction. Okay, understood? Class, understood? Okay, nice. Please give me your activity for today. Okay, nice one. Before I leave your room, I will give you an assignment to be passed next week, Monday. Instruction: pick a movement that is being discussed and make a poem that is connected with it. Instruction: pick a movement that is being discussed and make a poem that is connected with it. Put it in a long bond paper. Okay? Long bond paper can do. Do you understand? Okay, good. I love this class. Okay. Is there any question, clarification? Is there? Okay, none.
So, after what we have discussed in today's class, what do you think is the importance of being aware of these literary movements in our life and why? Anyone? Raise your hand if you want to answer. Yes, indeed. It is important to be aware of these literary movements or the overall literacy because knowing this makes us knowledgeable. We will learn to appreciate every literary works because it talks a lot about people's personal experience that knowing this makes us embrace and appreciate history. Any questions? Clarifications? So, if there is none, we will proceed to our quiz. I will be giving you a 10-point quiz. After this discussion, a Google link of your quiz will be sent to you and you are required to answer all of it. Are we clear? If we are clear about the quiz, let's proceed to the assignment. The instruction is, list 3 of the movements that you think are the most significant among them all, then explain why. That's all for today. Thank you and have a blessed day, everyone.